So pretty good news if you want to pick up a Death Guard Malignant Plaguecaster, but perhaps less so if you want to pick up a Primaris Champion, unless you're basically watching at time of release. Let's talk about two particularly rare and sought after Warhammer 40K miniatures that Games Workshop has released in two different ways. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today I thought we'd talk Primaris Champions and Malignant Plaguecasters with two Space Marine miniatures that a lot of people are looking to get their hands on. And if you've been looking to get your hands on these about a month or so ago, you'll be paying some fairly astronomical prices on eBay. Let's talk about the miniatures in turn and the way that Games Workshop's chosen to release them. First up, we'll talk Death Guard, and I feel like a fair few players might well be quite interested in this miniature. This guy is the Malignant Plaguecaster from the Space Marine Heroes range, really quite cool with his tri-point staff there, conjuring up a bunch of little plague flies to do his bidding. This guy is one of the 7 miniatures in the Death Guard Space Marine Heroes range, one that got a release over in Japan I believe, but never received an international release to my knowledge, much to the annoyance of quite a lot of people who quite liked the alternative Plague Marine sculpts, plus this guy in particular, who I feel like is one of the most rare and sought after 40k miniatures, at least judging by the astronomical prices that people seem to pay for him on eBay. The model itself I think is really quite nice. It's basically an alternative to the one that you got in Dark Imperium, the slightly bloated one who's on the top right of those three at the bottom there. Not a bad miniature I think, but I feel like he maybe was one of the more cartoony looking ones out of the new Death Guard range. Just personally, I do think that the Space Marine Heroes one does look a fair bit cooler, really quite gaunt and sinister, and the little conjured flies that he's got going on are kind of fun. Obviously aesthetics are completely dependent person to person, but whenever I've seen that discussed, I feel like there's just generally good reception for this mini in particular. I feel like he's particularly popular for two different reasons really. First up, the one from Dark Imperium is kind of annoying to get a hold of, and a fairly core Death Guard HQ choice. Most Games Workshop characters you can just pay around about £22 or something, and they come on their own, but if you want a Malignant Plaguecaster, you need to also get the Noxious Blightbringer, the very own character with the bell, and they're also randomly packed with a Death Guard aspiring champion as well. Definitely a fun model for a squad filler, but you should already have some bits for those in the actual Plague Marine kit. It seems between the looks of the model being hard to get and being a pretty important model for the Death Guard, the alternative one was really highly sought after. I feel like you can often gauge the sheer amount of demand for a model by the past prices that they sell for on eBay. And looking back at previous sold listings, it looks like they've been going for around about £100 to £300 in the UK. Massively crazy prices for a really quite tiny Space Marine infantry model. That equates to around about $125 to $375 US, just roughly. Fairly crazy stuff, and looks like there's a whole load of Death Guard players looking forward to getting their hands on this guy. As part of the Space Marine Heroes range, which I have talked about before here on the channel, this is Games Workshop's kind of lottery gacha game type thing, initially released over in Japan, and basically you get a random miniature within one of these box sets, but as it goes at a fairly affordable price for Games Workshop, and maybe not the worst if you just want one fun model for a faction to paint up and you don't really mind which one. Some people find that kind of release kind of fun, some a little bit annoying as you can't pick out the one that you want, but in general I don't really think it's the most harmful thing in the world. You can completely ignore it if you're just not bothered in doing that sort of randomness. And perhaps more usefully, they are actually bundled together in a set of 8 of them where you can pick up the whole set of them and be guaranteed every single miniature sculpt. If you do really want the Plaguecaster model, then I'd say that's probably going to be the best way to pick them up. Just going by the latest Blood Angels release for the Space Marine Heroes, I believe that they were £40 for the box set of 8, and some discount retailers did have them cheaper. Say for example Element Games, which I'll link down below, they have them at £34, that's here in the UK. Different regions might vary a little bit. The Heroes releases don't seem to be quite as uniform across the world as some of Games Workshop's other offerings. Compared with the Space Marine Heroes set though, I do feel like the Death Guard ones offer some pretty decent value as Warhammer goes. You can just directly compare with other squad and character kits. The Death Guard Plague Marines come with 7 models for £35, admittedly with a lot of different options, but I feel like the unique sculpts of these ones are really quite good fun, plus a lot of them come with friendly Nurglings, so that's quite cool as well. Then character miniatures are usually around about £20 or more. If you wanted to get your hands on a Plaguecaster anyway, you'd be spending £42 from Games Workshop, and for me I think I'd rather have the additional Plague Marines rather than the Blightbringer. You certainly get more miniatures for your investment. Overall I'd say this is a fairly interesting release. Let me know what your Death Guard players make of it down in the comments below. Would you be tempted to pick up a set of 8 of these for like £40 or $34 depending on where you get it from? The other limited edition release that I wanted to talk about was this one for the Primaris Champion, who I must admit I feel like Games Workshop are probably re-releasing in a less helpful way. To me, when this guy first got unveiled, he really did feel like a core part of the Space Marine range. From your classic Space Marine command squad, you'd often have him sharing that with the Apothecary, Tech Marine and Ancient, all of which have permanent Primaris equivalents now that you don't have to wait for a made-to-order run to get from Games Workshop. The miniature itself was fairly well received, maybe not the most groundbreaking thing in the world, but a fairly practical looking champion with a fairly cool pose. I was kind of a little bit disappointed not to see a combat shield on him, but I still think it's a really fun miniature and definitely gives me vibes similar to the Emperor's Champion. Initially this guy though was only released as an event only miniature in 2022. You could only pick him up at certain Games Workshop events or big events where they had a presence, and while that meant that he was a little bit easier to get your hands on him compared with the Plaguecaster released on the other side of the world, it still meant that if you wanted to order him in from, say, people reselling theirs on eBay, it looks like historic prices for him were around about £40 to £80, around about $50 to $100 if you're on that side of the Atlantic. Again, fairly ludicrous prices for only one single plastic infantry miniature, in my opinion. I feel like the most helpful thing for people would have been to just eventually release him as a permanent part of the range, but it looks like Games Workshop have released him as a made-to-order run, one that really doesn't have all that much time left on it at time of recording. I think by the time this video is uploaded, it will probably be around about 11 hours to go. It looks like he's gone again at 8 AM British time on the 29th of May, so I guess there's a little bit of Games Workshop fear of missing out for you. Seems that he costs £22.50, €30 or $35 on their web store, and as it's a made-to-order offering, they don't guarantee that you get one until 180 days after the release, though anecdotally a fair few of them do tend to turn up a bit faster than that. Still not sure exactly why they decided not to release him as a main miniature in the Primaris range, just seems odd seeing as they've filled most of the other major character gaps, plus they seem to have found enough time for a billion different flavours of lieutenants. When he was released initially, he did have his own unique datasheet. These are the rules that were shipped with him, kind of similar to how you'd expect really, pretty similar to the standard company champion but without the invulnerable save, though in melee he could gain one if he wanted with his blade stances. He could go on the defensive and get a 4+ invul and a +1 to his armor saving throw, or he could go on the attack and get a bonus to his strength and mortal wounds, or an extra attack and fights first. These rules were only Legends rules though, so were aimed at a bit more casual games, and weren't generally meant to be looked at by their balance passes, or for power gaming or anything like that, not that they seemed particularly overtuned or anything. I did have someone who told me in a comment that apparently he will have a 10th edition datasheet. Apparently they'd messaged Games Workshop in an email who confirmed that he would get one, but they wouldn't confirm whether or not it will be Legends or part of the core codex. Big thank you for letting me know that is kind of interesting to hear. If I had to guess though, I would suspect that Legends would probably be more likely if he isn't going to be on general sale. They do tend to mix things up a little bit from one model range to another, but their general rule tends to be that if they don't sell a miniature, then its rules aren't going to be in the codex, and it seems like they won't be selling this miniature after the made-to-order period ends. I guess whenever we get the big drop of 10th edition Legends datasheets, we'll find out the rules for him. I guess there's a non-zero chance he could be in the Codex Space Marine data cards though. In any case, let me know what you make of these two releases. If you're watching this early, would you be tempted to order a Primaris champion? Or would you be looking to pick up that new Plaguecaster if you play Death Guard? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k news coming. I do tend to try and cover Games Workshop's updates and model releases. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics has a Patreon page as well, and that's how I can afford to keep all these videos coming quite so regularly by making this my main thing that I do. The Patreon page is linked down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next, and automatic entry into the channel's monthly prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits. If any of that sounds interesting to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.